What's up, nerds? I'm Kendrick, your not-so-friendly neighborhood otaku, and welcome to my channel where I talk all things anime, manga, manhwa, and webcomics. If that's the type of thing you're into, then subscribe because I'll put one video out every Thursday to Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard and 2 to 3 shorts of anime commentary out every Monday to Wednesday, also at 1 p.m. Today, we're going to be continuing the series where I go back and reread the Jujutsu Kaisen manga over from the beginning and bring you all along with me. As always, this series is great for anyone who's a first-time JJK fan, anime only, who wants to get caught up, or who, like me, as the series progresses, begins forgetting some of those smaller details and key moments from early on in the series. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Volume 7. In Chapter 53, Haruto regrets not being able to do anything on the mission and wonders if he'll get scolded. Compared to him, he thinks Hanami's working too hard considering his body's in terrible condition with about half of it blown away after Gojo's attack. Hanami then collapses and Haruto offers to put him at ease, drawing his hand sword. Before he can do anything though, Mahito drapes an arm around his shoulder, making sure he knows his place. Mahito then confirms that the mission was a success since they secured 6 of Sukuna's fingers that were stored at Jujutsu High, as well as numbers 1 through 3 of the special grade cursed objects, death painting wombs. Since the facade of Jujutsu High is protected by Tengen's barrier technique, Surogero helped Mahito plan a way to bypass this. Before letting Jujutsu High retrieve Sukuna's finger that was left at Junpei's house, Mahito placed a talisman on it using his cursed energy. Since Mahito is the source of that cursed energy, he's able to locate the vault where those cursed objects were stored at Jujutsu High. They planned to use the curtain as a distraction from their real objective so Mahito could steal the objects without being noticed. Although they originally intended to kill anyone other than Sukuna's vessel, they decided against killing the students since one of them is a potential landmine for Sukuna. With the success of this mission, however, Surogero and the gang prepare to seal Gojo on October 31st in Shibuya. At Jujutsu High, Ichiji reads off the list of human casualties, essentially confirming Mahito's involvement. When Urahime asks if they plan to share this information with the students and other sorcerers, both principals say that they should keep it a secret so curse users don't realize special grade cursed objects were stolen. Unfortunately, taking Juzo in for interrogation has been uninformative since he's only mumbling about being tricked by a monk with white hair. Gojo, Urahime, and Meimei theorize that Hanami was able to bypass Tengen's barrier since he's able to get into plants and the barrier isn't effective on plants. See, Tengen's barrier hides rather than protects, so it's fairly easy to infiltrate. With all that has happened, Principal Yaga questions if the Goodwill Event is going to be cancelled, but Gojo says that's not up to them to decide. Meanwhile, Nobara and Yuuji are visiting Megumi in the healing ward. Megumi realizes that Yuuji has gotten stronger, and he claims he will also get stronger and surpass him. In the following days, the students decide to carry on with the Goodwill Event, and they reorganize it into a baseball game between the two schools. In Chapter 54, Aoi notes that mourning should be reserved for those close to the deceased, and the rest of them should focus on getting stronger. Therefore, they should continue the Goodwill Event. Once the other students agree, Gojo decides to forego the individual event and has Yuuji draw an event at random. Thus, the baseball game begins with Miwa batting and Momo and Urahime arguing about the rules. When Noritoshi steps up to bat, he asks Yuuji, the catcher, why he decided to become a jujutsu sorcerer. Yuuji notes that it just kind of happened and that he's a loner who wants to help lots of people, so he won't also be alone when he dies. Noritoshi thinks about how he only became a jujutsu sorcerer because of his mother's encouragement, so he understands Yuji's reasoning. With this, he decides not to swing and is struck out by Maki. For the Tokyo school, Nobara steps up to bat and is immediately enraged by the fact that Mekamaru is controlling a pitching machine. After confronting Mai, she goes back to bat and hits the ball, landing herself on first base. Megumi uses a sacrifice bunt so Nobara can advance, then Panda and Maki make solid hits. But Momo uses her broom to catch Maki's ball, causing the Tokyo team to argue as Aoi steps up to bat. Aoi says he'd prefer to go one-on-one with Yuuji as the pitcher, which annoys Maki. Aoi begins asking Yuuji to promise him something if he hits a home run when Maki strikes him in the face with the ball. Everyone congratulates her on the pitch as Yuuji realizes how much people don't like Aoi. Meanwhile, Principal Yaga asks Principal Gakuganji if he still hates Yuuji. Gakuganji says it's not about hating him or not, but following jujutsu rules. His presence as Sukuna's vessel cannot be tolerated, and bending the rules for one individual is not okay, especially since Sukuna can cause mass death. Yaga, however, believes Yuuji has the potential to save lives as a sorcerer. He thinks back to his former student Geto and notes all sorcerers experience regret. The baseball game continues as Yuuji makes a hit, allowing Inumaki to score, bringing Tokyo to win the 30th annual Goodwill Event. In Chapter 55, Taichi Kanata, a resident in Morioka, complains about the auto lock on his doors being broken and his apartment door being open. We then see a cursed spirit behind him and learn that Taichi died in June in Morioka. In August, Osamu Shimada was killed in Yokohama, and in September, Hiroshi Yamada was killed in Nagoya, all under similar circumstances. The only thing the three who died had in common was that they all went to the same junior high. Akari, an auxiliary manager at Jujutsu High, takes Yuuji, Nobara, and Megumi to where they can talk to people who knew the victims. But she was unaware that there was a funeral taking place place for another fellow classmate who died under similar circumstances. So they then head to the junior high that all of the victims attended and learn that it's actually Megumi's old school. When one of the school faculty arrives to question them, he recognizes Megumi, so Akari hands the conversation over to him. He asks Takata about any dark rumors and connections the deceased had. One of the ex-students mentions Yasahashi Bridge. Yasahashi Bridge is known for suicides and paranormal activity. Students would also bungee jump off of the bridge at nighttime as a test of courage, but that stopped before Megumi's generation. One day, 4 students didn't show up to school and their parents noted they didn't come home the night before either. Those students were found unconscious below the bridge, unable to remember anything. Megumi has been to Yasahashi Bridge before, since paranormal spots are a hot spot for curses, but he says there wasn't anything strange and it's still operating as a regular bridge. Before the Jujutsu High sorcerers leave, Takata asks Megumi how Sumiki is, to which he responds, fine. After Yuuji asks, Megumi informs him and Nobara that Sumiki is his older sister. Meanwhile, Mahito questions why the Jujutsu sorcerers didn't destroy cursed objects like the cursed wombs. Pseudo-Geto says that they can't simply destroy special grade cursed objects. They instead halt its lifestream with the constraint that it can do no further damage. Mahito points out that Sukuna is doing damage though, but Sukuna is an exception since he became a cursed object and is still able to attract other curses even after being split into 20 pieces and choose his own vessel. Whereas anyone can be the vessel for the cursed wombs. A normal human is nailed to the wall and fed a cursed womb by Mahito, transforming him into a cursed spirit. At the same time, the 3 students arrive at Yasahashi Bridge. In chapter 56, a cursed spirit is newly manifested from the human spirit that consumed the cursed womb. Elsewhere, Yuuji, Megumi, and Nobara investigate the bridge but don't find any traces of a curse. They grab a snack from a convenience store where one of Megumi's ex-classmates brings his older sister by. She visited Yasahashi Bridge at night when she was a student and is now experiencing a weird phenomenon. For the past week, when she comes home, the automatic door has been wide open, but her parents tell her that it's nothing. When asked who else went with her, she reveals that she visited Yasahachi Bridge with 2 upperclassmen and Sumiki. Megumi tries to play it off as being calm until the siblings leave, then immediately appears shaken. He tells Yuuji he'll be right back and places a call to Ichiji requesting backup, but they don't have any sorcerers to spare. Ichiji recommends that they retreat, but Megumi can't afford to wait. They have to exorcise this curse now. Megumi tells Yuuji and Nobara that the mission is more dangerous now and they should head back home. He says he'll be right behind them after seeing Takata-san and sends them off with Akari. In reality though, Megumi didn't want to put them in danger. He thinks about how Fujinuma-san said the test occurred was below the bridge and they wouldn't have been able to see it when Yuuji jumped if it used a barrier. But at nighttime there's no need for a curtain. Megumi heads below the bridge, but Yuuji and Nobara appear behind him, saying that Megumi can depend on them. Megumi explains that Sumiki is in a coma, so she won't be able to give them any information on the curse, which means they won't know when she'll be killed. There's a small river under the bridge, and the act of crossing a river or barrier has significant meaning in Jujutsu, so the act alone puts them in the curse's domain. They confront the curse inside, but suddenly the cursed spirit from the cursed womb appears behind them. Yuuji tells Megumi and Nobara to focus on the bridge's curse and he'll take on the new arrival. In chapter 57, the cursed wound spits acidic blood at Yuuji, but he's able to avoid it. It then grabs onto his arm, but he maneuvers his body around and kicks it in the face. Meanwhile, Nobara uses her straw doll technique Resonance, where the bridge curse is popping in and out. She's able to explode several of these locations, but the cursed spirit is able to avoid these attacks. Then, Megumi slashes at it with a cursed tool, but it disappears and pops up in a new exit. Nobara says they should think of it as whack-a-mole and continue crushing its exits until it only has one left. In exchange for its wide curse range, it appears to not be able to attack with its main body. As they're strategizing, another cursed spirit reaches through a void to grab Nobara, who tells Megumi to just keep whacking. The cursed wound Yuuji is facing asks if that was his older brother before following it and disappearing. Megumi yells for Yuuji to go after Nobara since she and at least one curse are now outside the barrier. The second cursed womb, Eso, tells Nobara that its errand doesn't involve killing sorcerers, so she should just leave. Inside the barrier, Megumi slices at the cursed bridge spear until he's finally able to slash it apart with Divine Dog Totality. Then one of the exits start morphing and Megumi questions why it's only killing people now that it marked years ago, until he remembers that back in June, Sukuna incarnated. Then a special grade curse similar to the ones they faced in the detention center appears before Megumi, noting its objective is to retrieve Sukuna's finger. In chapter 58, we learn that Sukuna's fingers, which possess an immense presence, are all resonating. When Yuuji ate Sukuna's finger back in June, it released cursed energy, unveiling one of Sukuna's fingers that was hidden by a cursed spirit. Megumi notes that while this cursed spirit looks similar to the ones from the detention center, it's much more powerful, shattering his cursed tool with a single blast of cursed energy. Megumi then begins summoning Nue while the curse evades Divine Dog Totality's attack, but it blitzes Megumi before he can finish summoning his Shikigami. After noting Yuuji's growth from the Goodwill Event, Megumi asked Gojo to train him. Gojo believes that Megumi's skill and potential are higher than Yuuji's. All that's left is the mental aspects, since Megumi doesn't know how to bring out his best. As an example, Gojo talks about how he used to sacrifice Bunt front, while people like Yuuji and Gojo are constantly swinging for the fences. But being a Jujutsu sorcerer is an individual sport. No matter how many allies they have, they will die alone. Megumi judges then matches those around him rather than picturing a stronger, better Jujutsu sorcerer version of himself. He needs to give it his all and be selfish. An unconscious Megumi awakens with blood running down his face as the cursed spirit approaches him. Divine Dog totality was dispelled when he was unconscious, so he plans to use the ace up his sleeve, but remembers Sukuna saying he was a wasted treasure. Then he gets up and pictures a version of himself surpassing his limits. Impassioned, Megumi activates domain expansion Shadow Chimera Garden, laughing maniacally. The domain is incomplete, but it's able to flood the floor with Megumi's shadow, spawning darker versions of his Shikigami. He pushes himself to think bigger and more freely of his technique's interpretation. The cursed spirit blasts a powerful ray of cursed energy through Megumi's hand, hitting him in the center of the head. It then blasts away the domain with a powerful explosion, believing that it won when suddenly Megumi and Divine Dog totality appear from its shadow. Since Divine Dog's claws were able to harm Hanami, this one will be no match for it. It punches through the chest of the cursed spirit, leaving Megumi victorious. In Chapter 59, a bloody and exhausted from battle Megumi holds one of Sukuna's fingers while looking for Nobara and Yuuji. Sukuna, who can see what happened through the finger, is impressed. When Megumi collapses, he thinks back to when he was in middle school putting punks in their place. He tells them the basis for human interaction is never crossing a line that violates someone else's dignity. He's then confronted by his sister Sumiki, who's not happy that he's picking fights again. We learn that Megumi's dad married, then quickly separated from Sumiki's mom when he was in first grade. After that, Gojo visited him and explained that he was sold to the Zenin clan, but will receive support from Jujutsu High in exchange for him working as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Megumi then walks away from Sumiki as she's approached by a friend who asks her to go to the bridge that night. Shortly after Megumi became a third year, Sumiki was cursed and she still sleeps to this day. Sumiki was a kind and forgiving girl who cared about Megumi despite his downfalls. Back to the present, Megumi lies under the bridge, apologizing to his sister, asking for her to wake up. Nobara and Eso, the second cursed womb, notice the domain has disappeared. Knowing that whoever now holds the finger must be severely injured, Eso plans to go after it, but Nobara tries to stop him. He moves in a strange manner so as to not show his back, saying he'll kill Nobara if she looks at it. Then Yuuji appears behind Eso with Kachizu, the first cursed womb, looking directly at the grotesque face on his back. Eso threatens to kill them when Nobara quickly hits the back of his head with her hammer. She asks why he's dressed like that. Eso says that it gets stuffy, then he activates his supreme rot technique, Wing King, sprouting wings of blood from his back. In Chapter 60, Akari goes to check on the students and realizes that they're all gone. Meanwhile, we learn that Eso's wings are made of a toxic blood that will cause his opponents to suffer death by wasp. They're then forced to run as Eso sends lines of toxic blood to chase after them. Nobara isn't able to evade them fast enough, so Yuuji carries her, using his inhuman speed and strength to evade the attack. Once Yuuji gets out of range, he puts Nobara down when they're attacked by Kachizu. Nobara is concerned for Yuuji when Kachizu spits blood at him, but she's attacked from behind by Eso. Eso explains that Kachizu's blood has a different quality than his. His blood won't kill her, it'll just hurt like hell. Eso then activates Supreme Rot Technique Decay, causing floral patterns to appear on Nobara and Yuji's body where they were hit by the cursed womb's blood. He explains that when someone is hit by the blood of a cursed wound and then decay is activated, their body will begin decomposing. With this technique now activated, he believes they'll both be dead within 15 minutes. Eso asks what they'll do next. He thinks about how Jujutsu sorcerers are nothing special. In fact, in the Meiji era, there's a girl who bore cursed spirit children of mixed blood, both human and cursed. She was ostracized by her family and fled to a temple run by Noritoshi Kamo, the most evil sorcerer in history, where all records of her 9 pregnancies and 9 abortions were erased. There was not a single trace left of what happened to this girl. Death painting wounds hold no particular hatred towards sorcerers or humans. For 150 years, they were sealed away with only the notion of each other's existence. When the 3 brothers were incarnated, they decided to side with Mahito since the future he strives for suits them. The 3 brother cursed wombs decided to live for each other as though they were one. Eso then returns his attention back to the fight, saying he can kill them now if they're in too much pain. Nobara admits that they're strong, but says she's a bad match for them, activating her straw doll technique Resonance, and stabbing herself in the wrist, injuring both Eso and Kachizu. As blood drips from her wrist, Nobara smiles and asks if they want to play a game of chicken. In Chapter 61, the final chapter of this volume, Nobara tells them to deactivate their technique if they can't handle the pain. Nobara's straw doll technique Resonance applies cursed energy to her opponent's body using an effigy, and damages the targeted area. Since Nobara's blood is strongly connected to the cursed wounds through their supreme rot technique, her technique will be effective. Eso thinks that no matter how many times Nobara uses her technique, she won't be able to beat them since she'll be in so much pain from the poison to move. However, Yuuji is immune to the poison thanks to Sukuna. and he begins charging his fist with cursed energy. Nobara then uses a second round of resonance to immobilize the curses while Yuuji attacks Kachizu. Worried, Eso calls out to his brother, prompting Nobara to activate resonance again to stop him from interfering. Yuuji and Nobara then switch places, forcing Eso to consider deactivating his technique before Nobara finishes Kachizu off. Thinking Nobara is too weakened from the decay to kill his brother, Eso decides to not deactivate the technique. He believes she'll succumb to decay before she can kill him. But when he sees Kachizu in such a rough state, he instinctively deactivates the technique, and instead activates Wing King, trying to attack Nobara from behind before she can attack his brother. However, Nobara's senses are sharpened from the pain of the deactivated technique. Yuuji is also right in front of Eso, preparing to attack. He notes both Yuuji and Nobara have ignited a spark. Then Yuuji and Nobara both unleash Black Flash, causing immense damage to the cursed wombs. Eso's right arm is completely destroyed despite the fact that he reinforced it with cursed energy. Kachizu then lashes out wanting to kill Nobara, but she finishes him off by activating her straw doll technique, Hairpin. This detonates the nail in Kachizu's face, violently exorcising him. With that, Volume 7 is brought to a close. As always, thank you to everyone who made it all the way to the end, and keep an eye out for next week where I'll post the full synopsis for Volume 8. That is all for today, and I will see you next time.